Joining us now from Newsmax, New York, Rick Ungar, senior political contributor for Forbes.com and co-host of Steele and Ungar on Sirius XM Radio. And by phone, Ken Adelman, former U.S. ambassador or deputy U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, former advisor to President Reagan, and author of the great new book, Reagan at Reykjavik, 48 Hours That Ended the Cold War. I love the book, Ken, and as always, Rick, I enjoy our discussions immensely. So, Ken, let's begin with you. We'll take a step back here for the historical perspective, especially since we're hearing now the Russians may have violated one of the treaties that you helped work out. The work you got done in Reykjavik and subsequently the arms agreement signed by Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev. Has Putin violated them? And what's going on now?
Okay, it's good to talk to you, J.D., and thank you for those very nice words on the book. I really enjoyed writing it and hope you enjoyed reading it half as much as I enjoyed writing it. As the book shows, Ronald Reagan wanted to eliminate as many nuclear weapons as possible, hopefully all of them, and in that weekend at Reykjavik really worked hard on this INF treaty right there. And the Reykjavik weekend was almost like an Agatha Christie mystery, where two unforgettable characters meet over a weekend in an old creaky house that's said to be haunted with rain lashing at the windowsills and experience the most amazing things. And those amazing things included the real outline to have this treaty of, it was called the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty, to eliminate the nuclear weapons that were aiming at NATO countries all through the 1980s on that. And that treaty was signed the next year, in 1987, at the East Room of the White House, and has been a tremendous success. Now, we're concerned that the government is violating that treaty right now by some of its tests, but let's not lose sight that those tests of cruise missiles now, while disturbing, still not anywhere near the threat that all of Europe faced when they had the SS-20s, these big ballistic missiles of the Soviet Union, just facing them through the latter part of the 70s and all through the 80s.
A quick follow-up, then I'll let Rick get in here. So what you're saying, it prompts this question, Ken. Was the president right simply to send a letter of protest? Should we be concerned about the Russian testing that apparently first started in 2008? And is it in violation of that treaty?
Yes, we should be concerned, but nowhere near as concerned as Putin's other 15 acts of behavior that are rather outrageous, including in Crimea, including in Ukraine, and including predominantly in Syria, where there's such slaughter of human beings and such disregard about human lives. And Putin's done just lots of things wrong, and this is just one of them.
Well, let me bring Rick Ungar in here. Rick, the president comes out yesterday with the announcement about sanctions, but he let his letter stand alone, the release, I believe, of the preceding day, that he had sent a letter of protest to President Putin. Should President Obama, in addition to mentioning the sanctions, have at least said something about the Russian behavior in terms of the cruise missiles and the possible treaty violation?
I suppose he could have. I think at that point you're kind of splitting hairs as to what he should say in the same speech. Look, I think Ken, not surprisingly, did a great job of summing up the situation, but then he was there. Who knows it better? They are breaking this treaty. I don't know what more you can do about it, though, other than send a letter. I don't think the president's interested in getting this Cold War thing going too in depth. I don't think it's good for us. I will say to you, though, that while I like that we're beefing up the sanctions, I like that the Europeans are finally starting to get on board, it appears. I'm a big fan of cranking up our natural gas production. I'm a big fan of building the terminals and the delivery means so that we can have a win-win. We do more business. We ship the stuff to Europe to get Russia out of the equation. That's not going to be very good for them. Great for us.
Gentlemen, General Jim Jones was on CNN discussing a meeting that he and the president held with Vladimir Putin. The comments of General Jones, I believe, somewhat revealing. Take a listen to what the general had to say, and we'd like to get your reaction after we hear it. Here it is.
For the next hour and a half, he delivered a rather chilling view of history in which he revealed himself, frankly, as someone who grew up in the Cold War, considers that the demise of the Warsaw Pact was one of the worst things that happened on the planet, that NATO was the archenemy. He resented the fact that NATO expanded to include former members of the Warsaw Pact. And he believed that the United States treated Russia shabbily in their hour of need.
Well, we hear that from General Jones, and let me ask you, Rick. We had that famous live mic moment when President Obama, before the last election, said to Mr. Medvedev, hey, just I need a little more flexibility. Is our president intimidated by Vladimir Putin?
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think any of the American presidents have been intimidated by Putin. Look, he is who he is. This is not a liberal conservative issue. We know who this guy is. I think much too much was made out of that aside that he gave. You and I have been in negotiations. You and I deal with people. Sometimes we say things for lots of different reasons. It's too bad it was an open mic, but obviously it hasn't proven to be true because he's not getting any more latitude, not from our side, but from the Russian side.
Well, Ken, let's get your take on it. We heard from General Jones talking about Mr. Putin being rather expansive with his worldview. We had that that open mic moment with the president and Medvedev before the last presidential election. Is this president, our president, too pliable in terms of dealing with Mr. Putin and the Russians?
Well, I think that conversation was very revealing, J.D. I think the fact is that Putin thinks it was just terrible that the Cold War ended. It was just terrible that the Soviet Union ended. It was just terrible that Marxism was discredited, and just terrible that the Eastern Europeans went and got freedom out of their own. Most people would think those are good things. He thinks they're very bad things. They all started at Reykjavik in October of 1987 with the discussions between Reagan and Gorbachev, and they, in our view, they made the world much, much safer. They made Russia a far lesser player than it was under the Soviets, and that, just irks the daylights out of Putin and the small group of Russian nationalists that he's there for. The fact is, our hope is that they will see that, the only path to any kind of civilized and decent country for themselves is the path of joining the world. But they certainly, that's not the way Putin is leading them, and in fact, he's leading them just the opposite way.
A couple of minutes remain. Ken, just a quick follow-up. You spent a lot of time with Ronald Reagan. Did you ever hear him talk about, quote, American flexibility with Mr. Gorbachev and the Soviets?
Well, he didn't have to talk about it because he practiced it, to say the truth. He was willing at Reykjavik to sit down with the Soviets, but he was also willing to stand up to the Soviets. And that was the nice combination that Reagan had. He had three elements that we just don't see today, and that is he had an overall strategy. As the book shows, beginning in the 1970s, he said, I know that the Cold War will end, and I know how it will end. We win, they lose. Secondly, he had various steps that he would take to bring about that strategy, and that's the Strategic Defense Initiative, building up the military, and deep reductions in nuclear weapons, and delegitimizing the Soviet ideology. And thirdly, he just had the courage to lay it out, implement the steps, and see it through a lot of criticism. And that included not only his first term up to 1985, but through the Reykjavik summit.
Well, last word, let me give to Rick Ungar. Are these sanctions going to work, Rick?
I don't know. I think that with Europe getting on board, we got a better chance. As I say, though, the answer is, first of all, I got to congratulate Ken. He didn't take your bait on trying to trash the president, and with good reason. This is about Putin. Our president is doing the best he can. Sanctions may work. I think the end of the day, we have to raise our natural gas production and become Europe's supplier. That works.
After all, Ken is a diplomat, and what the heck, I'm just a recovering congressman.
I've never been accused of that before.
Well, it's good to have you both, gentlemen. We'll have to end it there. There's more straight ahead here on America's Forum.